Texas wins it 35-6 over BYU. The Longhorns now 7-1. Welcome to the Horns 24/7 Instant Reaction. I'm joined by the flyest man in Austin, Texas, Eric Henry, joining us from DKR Texas Memorial Stadium. Eric, let's get right to it. The biggest storyline today coming in was Maalik Murphy's first start as a Longhorn. He goes 16 of 25 through the air, 170 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, and a fumble. What do you make of the redshirt freshman's performance in his first start?
All things considered, if I had to give it a grade, I'd give it about a B-. Maalik didn't want to grade himself when we spoke to him post-game. Here's the reason why I say that B-. It wasn't that Maalik did anything out of sorts that really cost his team. The interception, that's one that if you take a look at it, it looked like he wasn't ready for the snap, and that entire play looked to be out of sorts. So I'm not putting that one squarely on him. And the same thing with the fumble, right? He looked as if that rush there, Jonathan Brooks kind of picked him up a little bit. Couldn't tell if it was, Hayden Conner was supposed to pick him up. So, he probably needs to do a better job of quarterback of feeling out the rush. But even that being said, that one I wouldn't put on him. The positives were definitely an efficient performance in terms of, he took the shots downfield when they were there. He took the underneath shots when they were there. But definitely, and Steve Sarkisian said this in his postgame, the offense did at times look a little bit out of rhythm, that the offense looked a little bit out of rhythm at times. So, and that's not squarely on Maalik, but I think there definitely was a noticeable lack of rhythm at times that, maybe you can look at Maalik and say, hey, okay, if this play goes right, or if we don't get an interception here, or some things will look kind of choppy, that's probably a byproduct of having a first-time starting quarterback. So all in all, a B-, but definitely not, negative or harping on him in any sense of, because he didn't cost his team in my mind. Again, the 2 turnovers were all things that I think were a joint byproduct of the entire offense performance and not squarely on him. So definitely room for improvement. And it does appear that, we're in line to see Malik Murphy again next week. Steve Sarkisian did say that Quinn Ewers is week to week, but you have to assume that with Kansas State heading to DKR in 7 days, Malik's going to be back under center. And it's going to be a tough task, Tommy, because that's one of the top defenses in all of Big 12, in all of the Big 12, 4th overall in total defense, 2nd in run defense. So definitely some things to clean up between now and Saturday. But all in all, I think a solid performance, but definitely one where you could see the difference between Maalik and kind of how the offense looked at times with Quinn Ewers.
Kansas State coming into this game, one of the better teams the last 2 weeks, not just in the Big 12, but I think you can really say the country. We'll talk about them a little bit more here in a bit. Let's go. Keeping it with the offense. Coming into this game, Texas had scored 30 points in their prior 7 games, at least offensively. They make it 8 straight games this season doing that now, so that's definitely a positive. Looking at the run game specifically, Jonathan Brooks, 2 yards shy of a 100-yard day on 16 carries and a touchdown. Jaden Blue had his first career touchdown and a 30-yard score in the 4th quarter. And as a unit, Texas carried the ball 35 times for 184 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's good for 5.3 yards per carry. Eric, what do you make of the run game, considering coming into this game with Maalik Murphy starting for the very first time? Knew that was going to be something that Steve Sarkisian wanted to lean on a little bit. I think he leaned on it less than people were expecting, but nonetheless still benefited pretty well for him. And you mentioned next week, Kansas State, a very tough run defense. What did you like from that crew, and what do you think can improve going against a very tough defense next week?
Yeah, Tommy. I wrote about this last week following the Houston game, that I felt that for Maalik, his best friend would be a power run game, one that situationally performed well. And for the most part, the run game did do just that. You take a look at some of the 3rd down conversions by Jonathan Brooks, that power run down there in the end zone, that in the red zone that scored the touchdown. And then you take a look at CJ Baxter also converting some 3rd downs as well. Of course, he did have the disappointment down there, the red zone stop, where of course he got stopped on 4th and 1. Jonathan Brooks wasn't able to cash in. But all in all, I think the run game really performed well, Tommy. At various points in this game, it really looked like Texas owned the line of scrimmage, in my mind, at least offensively. I asked Steve Sarkisian in his post game, I said to him, hey, what did you make of your run game, considering the fact that only twice in this ball game where your running back stopped for 0 yardage or for 0 yards or less? And he said, hey, if there are 2 things that I can carry into any game, it's a run game and a defense. He felt that his run unit in the offensive line did perform well. Of course, he did, obviously state the outlier with the goal line stop. But all things considered, I felt the run game performed well against one of the lesser tier units in the Big 12 as far as run defense. Now, as I stated in the opening, the question is going to be, how can they perform against a Kansas State team that is second and I believe in the top 25 in the nation and run defense, allowing only 109.4 yards per game. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. But all in all, if they can own the line of scrimmage, I think that is a big thing going forward, not just for next week, but really for the duration of this season, and especially with Malik behind center.
Speaking of the line of scrimmage, Texas definitely owned the line of scrimmage defensively as well. A lot of question marks about this defense after a struggling performance against Houston. They come back in resounding fashion today, only allowing 6 points, forcing 2 interceptions and a fumble, 2 sacks, 10 quarterback hurries, 12 tackles for loss. They held BYU to 95 yards on 26 carries. That's good for 3.7 yards per carry, and 2 of 13 on third down. So Pete Kwiatkowski's group comes back. Now, granted, BYU's offense has struggled in the past couple of weeks and really all season. Keaton Slovis is a guy who has struggled at every stop that he's been in, with all due respect. So, somewhat of it's a good sign, but that there's going to be better to come, especially as we've talked about a lot with Kansas State next week. They have a 2-quarterback system going on right now with Will Howard and Avery Johnson. Eric, looking to Saturday today, what did you like from this group and what carries over?
2 things, Tommy. One, what I liked was, and I did ask some of the players post-game, this to me felt like the team's most complete defensive performance. Here's why. I think if you take a look at the numbers, they may have allowed fewer yards to Rice, but no disrespect, that's Rice. This still was a 5-2 team coming in, albeit their 5 wins weren't against, top tier competition. Still a team that performed well, obviously beat up on Texas Tech last week. So you had to come to this game and really ask yourself, what were you going to see from your team? And the defense rose to the occasion. They rose to the challenge. I mean, Jahdae Barron, just an outstanding player. We've talked about him numerous post games, Tommy, with the impact he has on this defense. You see him, when the early drives getting that open field stop, one-on-one stop there to put the BYU offense behind the chains. And then, of course, he affects the pass, the Keaton Slovis pass. He jumps up, of course, doesn't get to the quarterback on a blitz, jumps up, tips it, and that pass ends up being picked off. This is another game where the Texas defense, now back-to-back games where they've forced multiple turnovers, something that Steve Sarkisian said he wanted to see more of coming out of the bye week. So all in all, and I think this has to be looked at as one of the more complete defensive performances. And you did talk about it. It was asked of Michael Taft, hey, you're going to face another dual threat quarterback in Avery Johnson. Are you guys up to the challenge? And he said, yeah, absolutely. We think that we're kind of finding our groove and hitting our stride as a defense. And everything starts with that front 4. Both Taft and Steve Sarkisian said that the front 4 really is the unit that jumpstarts everything for that defense and allows the back end to kind of fare well and have success. So all in all, I think you have to be encouraged by this defensive performance. Again, Jahdae Barron, Jalen Ford, Jalen Gilbo stepped in and got some playing time as well. And especially, Tommy, I think another thing, with Jalen Catalon being banged up, really solid safety performance from Taft and Keaton Crawford. So that's another thing as well. If they can get that depth and that rotation going on defense, especially in the secondary and across the front 4, they're going to be in great shape. So we'll see, because guys like Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy and Barron Sorrell, those guys are going to travel. Those guys are going to show up. They're going to play well. But it's a matter of getting those other guys that are on defense to kind of, again, rise to the occasion and play their best football. And I think right now they do have the ability to take their game to another level, and it's going to be needed against Kansas State.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned Keaton Crawford and Michael Taft with his second interception in as many games today. And then Keaton Crawford had a much better performance than he has had. I think maybe you could say his best game of the season so far today against BYU. Now, quickly back to the offense. Last week, Texas goes 4 for 4 in the red zone. They had struggled there all season, so you kind of check that off as a positive, despite the fact that it was a very close game. They only won that one by 7 against a Houston team that lost to Kansas State 41-0 today. But it kind of rears its ugly head again today. 2 of 5, and simply put, Eric, they just couldn't punch it in from close range. Was there something that you noticed that's a common factor between those red zone struggles carrying into today? Is it maybe a play calling issue or not enough push from the offensive line? Can you point something to it, and how do you fix it?
Well, Tommy, I can't necessarily say it's a common factor, because it seems each time they have those goal line failures or those red zone failures that it's a different kind of culprit, right? If you take a look at the play that they were stopped to 4th and 1 where they couldn't punch it in, it looked to be at pulling guards, right? And that's something that, listen, Steve Sarkisian, he always liked to say to us when we, ask him on Mondays, I don't get the opportunity to Monday morning quarterback it. I got to choose the play call in about 10 seconds or less, right? But I do think that is something that when you have Byron Murphy and then you got pulling guards, maybe a whole lot going on there in terms of that run play. Maybe you can second guess that. Who knows? The Savion red zone. I think that's something that I still think is a very effective weapon for them. But you now know, Tommy, teams are going to game plan for that, right? It's not just a little wrinkle that all of a sudden we're going to Savion red and he's kind of that wildcat, right? Teams are going to game plan for that. So maybe we'll see something in the form of Savion with a pass in the goal line, for example, in the red zone that we saw in the Oklahoma game. Who knows? But in my mind, there wasn't one common culprit as much as just a lack of execution. And a guy who's as creative of a play caller and as, for lack of a better word, I'd say as talented of a play caller, Steve Sarkisian, you have to assume he's going to get it figured out. But everything has to start with the fact that when you're in the red zone, you're in the goal line, those windows get tighter, everything gets more condensed. So finding a way to get that push off the ball and, of course, score. So we'll have to see what happens. But I don't think there's been one common culprit in my mind. You take a look at some of the struggles over the past few weeks.
Well said, Eric. I think that puts it very well and very into perspective. We'll see if that issue gets fixed going into next week against Kansas State. And speaking of the Wildcats, we mentioned earlier, they beat Houston 41-0 today. Over the past two games, they've won by a combined 82-3. So Kansas State firing on all cylinders right now. And when you look at the Big 12 as a whole, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas State, and Iowa State, now the four teams tied atop the Big 12 with one loss. Oklahoma State has a chance to join them tonight with a win over Cincinnati. So there's your Big 12 picture as of right now. And now, Eric, to close things out, our players of the game on offense and defense. I'll let you take it first.
Yeah, Tommy, on offense, I think the obvious choice is Jonathan Brooks, but I'm going to leave you room to choose JB because I'm going to go outside the box. Xavier Worthy. I wanted to mention this in our post-game recap. When we talked with X during the week, I asked him, I said, how close do you feel that you guys are in the special teams unit to breaking one? And he kind of gave me that smile and said, listen, we're close. I think it's going to happen soon. And of course, Jeff Banks' special teams unit really sets the tone for the game, putting their quarterback, putting their first-time starter in position to succeed with a 7-0 lead. So I'm going to give a shout-out to Xavier Worthy. Well, of course, that's a special teams play. I'm going to take him on offense for really breaking things open and kind of helping get the offense settled in and not really having, to kind of force some things. It's always easier to play when you're ahead, right? And on defense, I'm going with Jahdae Barron. Everyone who knows, either you follow me on Twitter or you've read my articles or you've watched this post-game podcast, how big of a fan I am of Jahdae Barron. Again, setting the tone, that open field tackle, putting BYU behind the chains to set the tone for the defense. And again, just the football IQ, the football awareness of him coming on the blitz. He could have easily given up, knowing that he was 3, 4, 5 yards away from the quarterback, but he stops and uses vertical leap and times it just right and gets that tip of the Keaton Slovis pass, ends up being picked off. So, I'm going to go with Jahdae Barron as my defensive player of the game.
All right, two solid picks there, Eric. Offensively, you left Jonathan Brooks for me. I thought you were going to take him. I'm going Adonai Mitchell here. 3 receptions for 59 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think he ended up being Malik Murphy's best friend today through the air. Both of those touchdown passes going to Adonai Mitchell. And then defensively, I had 1A and 1B thinking you would take one of these guys, so I'll give you them both. 1A for me was T'Vondre Sweat. He was everywhere in the middle as he has been all season. Just phenomenal day from him with 7 tackles, 1.5 of those for loss. And then Terrence Brooks as well in the secondary at that corner spot. I think he gets better every game. And he's been phenomenal alongside whether it's Ryan Watts or Malik Muhammad. I think he's been playing really well. 4 tackles, the interception, and then a pass breakup as well. So Texas wins it 35-6. They've got a tough one next week with Kansas State coming into town, rolling in hot as well. Thanks you so much for joining us here on the Horns 24/7 Instant Reaction. And while you're here, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you are the first to know when new content heads your way. For Eric Henry and the rest of the crew at Horns 24/7, I'm Tommy Yars. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.